Well, I'm here with Ben Sinnard, church planter, pastor at Grace and Peace in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, to talk about his journey in church planting. And so, without much further ado, welcome, Ben. Glad to have
Thanks.
you with us. Let's just get started. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background that led you here, and then we'll want to hear kind of what led to the decision to church plant.
Sure. Yeah. Um, well, I grew up in Nebraska and became a Christian. God used a transition in my youth pastor, actually in a Methodist church growing up, to bring me to faith. And so that was a interesting dynamic for me growing up. Uh, Went to college at the University of Nebraska, got involved with campus ministry there, and that's when I first got connected to a PCA church called Zion PCA in Lincoln. And uh, yeah, that was a great experience for me growing kind of in campus ministry and also seeing church work well. And then worked for a campus ministry for a couple of years called the Navigators after college, and went off to seminary in St. Louis, and then moved back to Lincoln to help a church plant about 4 years in, kind of begin particularization and carry that through. And then God called me all the way to Delafield, Wisconsin,
Mhm.
where Chris Vogel was the senior pastor at Cornerstone Church. And I worked there for about 8 years. And then in 2020, fall of 2020, transitioned to plant Grace and Peace Church in Oconomowoc, which is about 20 minutes west
Yeah.
of where we're
Okay.
planting. So
Yeah.
that's a brief history of how we got here.
Okay. So you were at Cornerstone, which was the mother church of Grace and Peace, for
Yep.
8 years,
Yep.
and ordained about 2 years before that.
Correct. Yeah.
So when you were in seminary,
Mhm.
did you think about church planting?
Well, not really, honestly. I went into seminary still pretty interested in campus ministry. So we
Hmm.
went to seminary mostly because we couldn't fundraise enough to stick with the navigators. Uh, and we wanted to get better trained. And so there was kind of twofold reason there. And then in seminary, really enjoyed it, got involved with a church plant that was, I want to say it was about 3 years old when we got there, called South City Church. And that experience was great for me and my wife, Kara, and was definitely the most church plant kind of church we've been a part of.
Hmm.
Zion and Lincoln had just planted a church when we started going there in college, called Grace Chapel. And so I kind of saw the mother side of the church planting, which was really cool to be able to pray for them and kind of like get updates on them. But we weren't we weren't on the line, so
Yeah.
it's a little different experience on that side of things. But South City was great. I would say like going into it, we thought campus ministry. Coming out of it, we thought more vocational ministry, pastoral ministry, not necessarily church planting, but we really like being connected to churches that like to church plant.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's why this position, when we got out of seminary at Redeemer PCA in Lincoln, which was now another church plant of Zion, was great because I knew the pastors. I actually knew most of the guys that were coming up for eldership for their particularization, and they just needed me to do like to help with some things. I
Hmm.
wasn't the one planting; I was just able to help, which was great. Um, and so, yeah, I didn't. Yeah, it took me a while to start to think about church planting myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, I think that helps because it's not as though came right. Well, you went to seminary, you want to be a church planter, or the program there just pulled you in and wanted to do it. So it
Mm-hmm.
was a process. So what happened in the process? Through 10 years of ordained ministry that
Yep,
then led you to that point.
sure. Well, I mean, I think some of it is just learning, getting to know yourself more. So I'd seen the guys who I'd seen plant were, on the disc scale, high D's. I'm a little more of an I. on the disc scale. I'm not super type A. Like that's kind of what I had in my mind of a church planter, because that's kind of what I'd seen. There were aspects of different guys that a church planter that I could relate with, but some of the things I just felt were very foreign to me. And so it took me a little while to just kind of figure out, and for God to just kind of shape me and to get to me to know who I am. And Cornerstone was really good for that. Part of my first 2 years of ordained ministry was just chaotic because there was some turmoil at the church I was at. I got put into a different role very quickly, preaching every week, and it was not what I signed up for. And so, long story, I'm not going to go into that. But Cornerstone was really good because it actually helped me kind of like take some breaths, breathe a little bit more, and just kind of start to think about like what's God calling me into long term. So I remember took that job thinking I was going to be a long-term associate pastor. Like that's kind of what I thought I was being called to. And that process kind of changed as I started thinking about how I relate to change and how I, as a pastor, assist in change. And the change at Cornerstone was hard for me, changing things. And it's not that Cornerstone was wrong. It's just, I think established churches just change slowly. And
things are baked in, and
what's that?
Things are already baked in.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was hard. I kind of used to tell, my friends and such that like change at an established church is like moving a ship. It's like turning, I mean, you can't turn quick. I don't thrive well in that. Like, and so I always felt like things took like a year when I think it should take like a month to do some of these changes. And so that was hard. It was hard, but I also really appreciated it. I think it helped me to learn to value like the greater body. And so I'm glad I had that opportunity, because it did actually help shape, my heart for people that aren't like me. So, which was really good. But I would say it was probably the second year I was at Cornerstone and moved to Wisconsin. I got involved with the missions committee at the presbytery level. And in the process, that committee, with Chris and a number of other people, began creating the Wisconsin network and program, and kind of thinking through the church planting kind of future of Wisconsin. And so kind of being able to be just like a part of that was really good for me. Like I really enjoyed that, and kind of just dreaming together and thinking about like what God could do. Continue just to kind of like start just kind of cropping up like what's my role? Like what's my role in all this? And I still think I thought at the time when that was getting created was associate pastor at Cornerstone, long-term member of the missions committee, and really help kind of be that role. And I felt okay with that. I felt fine with that. And while that was going on, I got a call from a good friend of mine who was planting a church in Cleveland, and he had asked me if I would come and plant a sister church with him, kind of next to him, kind of in partnership. And I was flattered, and I said I'd pray about it. The Lord quickly, brought up that Cleveland's not my jam. So no offense to those who are Clevelandites, but the idea of church planting for me didn't go away in that moment. And so that was kind of like, that kind of hung on. Like, why am I not thinking about this? Like, why would I say no to this? And so then that just began a journey of just discernment. So Chris was a part of that discernment with me. My wife was a part of that discernment with me. And those two experiences, Chris and Kara, my wife, were very different stages of my processing. And so Kara was very
we are
slow.
two different people,
Two different people, yeah.
You and I are not married. So.
This is true. But like Kara was very slow. She liked the stability that we were having at Cornerstone. And then Chris was like, well, let's explore it. And so very, like, in a very healthy, good way, I thought, like, let's start talking about it. What would you, where could it be? And so trying to navigate in my own heart, just like exploring and bringing Kara along without going too far in my own heart. Was a journey. Took some time. I didn't start planting honestly for another well, close to 4 years, I'd
Yeah.
say, from first conversations, I suppose. Some of that was transitions and different things involved in that, um, but it was a really good. I'm glad that it went that way. I think it really helped give me time to work on just some of the areas that need to be worked on in my
Hmm.
life, and I
Yeah.
feel like I'm better suited to plant now than I would have if I would have jumped in right away.
Right. Right. It's interesting you describe those very different factors. So in this context, yeah, I was encouraging, and if I can mention, when you got the call from Cleveland, you're a little hesitant. Should I even bring this up? Because we were working together, and say, hey, I want to go do something else.
Yeah,
In some church contexts, that could be a dangerous
yeah,
thing to mention. And others, it can be encouraged. You kind of have to know that
yeah,
situation. Some wives are like, yeah, let's do this. And some are
mhm,
like, yeah,
yeah,
let's take it a little slower. And so it's measuring all those factors
yeah.
together is important. Yeah.
I think taking it slow is always going to be helpful. I think it's such a big decision. I mean,
Hmm.
I think sometimes we jump into things too quickly, and we just there's a lot of factors that may need to adapt. And I mean, from our first conversation to when I actually like started was like, I mean, a good 4 years, and I'm really glad because I think it helped me just kind of crystallize kind of mission and vision and where it ended up being. And I
Hmm.
mean, if we would have planted a year earlier, we would have planted right before COVID, which would have been I mean, a nightmare, honestly. But planting during COVID is a little different. It's a little
Yeah.
easier when you're in the middle
Okay.
of it.
We're going to get back to some of the earlier stuff, but you just said that. So why was it easier in COVID?
Well, first of all, it's easier for me because I mean, just kind of leaving an established church that's trying to wrestle through COVID stuff was real hard. It
Okay.
was real
Yeah.
easy, honestly, to leave it because it was such a
All right.
hard time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So personally, it was like a breath of fresh air because it's like, okay, we don't have these things to deal with. We're just gonna kind of do what we can.
Yeah. Yep.
And
Yep.
people don't know, like the church hadn't been formed yet, so they don't know what they don't have yet, and
Hmm.
so we didn't have a regular meeting church, so we had to stop, or we had to like
Yeah.
do everything. Like we just started with worship with masks, and when we did it, and it was just normal for
Right.
us, and eventually became like we didn't have to do that anymore, and it was like this new thing. So um, I don't
Yeah.
know. When you start in the middle of kind of chaos, chaos is the norm,
Right. Right.
um, not this weird thing that you're adding into. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it worked out.
I
So
I had just didn't click in my mind the whole issue of it's yeah, it's going to something, it's also leaving something, and
yeah,
it wasn't just Cornerstone.
no,
Other so many other churches were having those issues. I had left about two
yeah,
years 2 years before that from Cornerstone, and made the mistake of saying to some friends, how glad I was in 2020 that I wasn't preaching at churches, and they kind of looked at me and said nasty things under their breath.
yeah,
So
yeah.
in that process, in that 4 year process, how did that go? What was the emotional, the other, and the intellectual preparation to be able to take those steps to convince
Yeah,
Kara, uh, with the and the session as well as the church.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the session was honestly pretty great. I mean, the idea of me planting was seemed like a fairly easy sell for them. They felt
Hmm.
pretty convinced of it pretty early, which I think the harder part was that I was kind of I think there was kind of a target for this role being a longer term role, so having to kind of like shift away from that for
Hmm.
them was a little bit harder, and but it was fine. I think for me it was much more just developing skills, and so I got to preach a couple of like sermon series while you did some preaching teaching overseas, and took a sabbatical during that time, and so like I got to do a little more regular weekly preaching, which was I think really good, both in terms of creating a series, preaching
Hmm.
through the series, um, figuring out rhythms of what works well, um, and I think those were good. It's also like it's changed since I've been preaching almost 95% of the time at the church plant. Like my rhythms are a lot different now,
Yeah.
and you know my stamina for how many I can preach in a row is much different than it once was, which
Hmm.
is good thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so
But
there's some of that, and then I actually got to take a sabbatical um, about a year and a half before I left.
hmm
So Chris had transitioned to his roles in the Presbyterian M&A and things, and then I uh, kind of helped the church pastorate for a little bit, and then we had an interim come into Cornerstone. Once he got set up, then I took a sabbatical for about 2 months, and that was visited 5 church plants and read several kind of books and kind of started to create a philosophy of ministry and like demographics of the place that we were moving towards.
hmm hmm
And so that was really just helpful to kind of start to crystallize those things. And then obviously assessment as well was a little before that, but
Yeah. Yeah.
those are all just really good, I think, markers for me. And there
So
were
that,
some really particular things that I was working on.
hmm
Um, One of those things was just my desire for people to like me, and so how I take feedback, and that was something as we just did some staff training with Chris and I and others. That was a area for improvement, and so that was something I took seriously and tried not to learn to trust who God says I am, and my identity rooted
hmm
in that more than if a sermon didn't go the perfect way I wanted it to go, or if someone had feedback on something or didn't like this or that, like it would crush me. And I'm very thankful that the Lord has freed me from some of that. It's not completely gone, but much better.
You're more aware of it. That's the
We're aware of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah, so in that process, I think what's interesting is you described it there. There was both kind of internal and
Mhm.
also I would say external, but
Sure.
tactical growth. Reading, visiting other church plants, getting a sense of see what they're doing, but
Yeah.
also having the preaching reps, not jumping right from that
Yeah.
that role to immediately going into another without the
Yeah.
kind of that preparation pipeline.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so important because I mean, most guys who go to church plant haven't preached regularly.
Yeah.
So it's I mean, it's a lot of what you'll be doing a lot of it,
hmm
and you can find fill-ins and guests, but depending on where you're at, it's easier than some place. In some places it's
Yeah.
really hard. So
Yeah.
I would totally take advantage of what the church allows you to that you're working at to get that
hmm
opportunity.
Yeah. So in planting out of Cornerstone, about what 20 minutes away,
Yeah.
did you have a launch team? Was this a
Yep.
scratch plant? What was it?
Yeah, we did. We had about 27 people that came with us.
hmm
So I really wanted to keep it under 30 was kind of my goal, um, for a variety of reasons. Um, and it was a great team. There was probably about of that group, there was probably about 4 or 5 like core families that were like really, really into it. And there was some other people that kind of, whether it was just geographic or kind of mostly in that area, that kind of came along too.
Yeah.
But those 4 or 5 families were crucial, I think, to the start of it. Um, One of them happened to be a musician, which came with us,
hmm
which, and then one was a former elder, or was a current elder at
Yeah.
Cornerstone, and then transition, and
Yeah.
then one was a deacon. And so I
hmm
kind of got like this sweet team of
Yeah.
like help with shepherding, help with like admin and related
hmm
service and mercy and things, and then help with worship. Got kind of super lucky.
Yeah.
The Lord blessed me significantly. So,
Yeah. And, as you think about that, we're all gifted differently,
yeah.
and every context has differences to it. But the fact that going out with a team, how was that helpful for you?
It was necessary.
Okay. All
So
right. Yeah. I mean,
it
would you have wanted to do a scratch plant?
no. I think I don't know if it was the assessments for I don't know if it was like all the evaluations and things you do with assessment,
Mhm.
or if it was like the assessor's evaluations of me. I can't remember, or both, probably both. Planting by myself, kind of dropped in a location, figure it out, was not wise. Was kind of the term. I just I just need I just needed that team
Hmm.
to be both an encouragement for me, uh, but also just kind of how on the disc profile being an I, like you kind of need something to like influence. So
Yeah.
that's how I operate, and so um, that was really crucial for me.
Yeah.
Part of that was, I think, the process to feel like it's okay for me not to be like this scratch planter kind of guy, and it's
Hmm.
okay to the team, and it's okay that it may look different than other friends of mine that have done planting. So
So talk about that. What do you mean that process that to know it's okay? I mean, don't want to put words in your mouth. So,
no, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead. Describe that.
No, I think you just kind of see it's gotten so much better. I think a
Hmm.
part of that, I think the assessment center's done better. M&A is doing a great job of like anyone can plant. You just need to know what you need to plant. Like you need
Hmm.
so I think that's not a message that I, in my first early years of kind of seeing planting and seeing
Hmm.
church planters, was something I saw. I
Okay.
saw a specific type of planter, and I wasn't that. So
Hmm.
it took a little while for me to kind of believe that, and
Yeah.
that's cool. And I feel good about how it all worked out. And um, yeah, we prayed a lot. We did not have the worship pastor or worship director. They were actually living in a different city, and we had asked them early on when we first started doing this. They were very good friends of ours. Would you guys ever consider moving to Oconomowoc? It's too far for them. It'd be about a 40-minute drive for them to be a part of the church from where they were located. And their answer to us was, "There's no way in the world we're moving to Oconomowoc." And then we all cried, gave each other hugs, and we said, "Is okay," but we kept praying for a worship, someone to lead worship before we weren't even moved there yet.
Hmm.
And then we bought a house, and then like a month later they go, "You're not going to believe this, but we bought a house in Oconomowoc." So you pray and you see what happens, and the Lord
Yeah.
does great things.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's great. So, okay, let's talk about the process a bit more. So, interested, the session at Cornerstone says yes.
yeah.
What happened then?
So then you have to just decide, like, if you're going to plant out of a church. Um, I mean, if you're just going to plant wherever, you just kind of
Yep.
figure it out. You get on board with the presbytery, and you kind of go do your thing. Planting out of a church with like a mother-daughter relationship means that you kind of have to flex a little bit with timing.
Hmm.
Um, I probably wanted to plant 2 years before we actually planted, just in my own time.
Yeah.
Um, Now, retrospect, I'm glad we didn't. I'm very thankful.
Hmm.
But you kind of just flex with that, and so there was things at the church that needed some tending to, and so that's part of the calling as a pastor is that you shepherd the flock that God's given you, and
Yeah.
that's where the flock I had at that time, and so um, timing just adapted over time and took a little longer, or um, any of those kind of things that may or may not kind of ebb and flow a little bit, and
All
so
right.
but once it I think once you get to that time where it's like, this is the date, you kind of the church, the session has to go with it, we have to be agree with it, and then you kind of have to just run
Hmm.
with
It,
it.
it and so when in that was assessment in that
Yeah,
process? Was it
assessment was probably about halfway in there.
was that January of 19 or was that
I think that's probably right.
yeah. So
I think that's probably,
it was a good year plus
yeah,
before you were started worshiping.
yeah, yeah. I think it was a while, and um so part of that was, I mean, just because we had an interim pastor at the
Hmm.
time, and at Cornerstone, and we still wanted to plant a church, and it was just more of just like figuring out, like, how do you plant a church when you have an interim pastor,
Yeah.
who's going to be the senior pastor. So there's just a lot of questions, and then that all ended up getting worked out, which felt like there was a good it was
Hmm.
time to transition at that point. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's kind of why I was a little up in the air for a little
Right.
while.
Which again, no two situations are going to be the same.
Yeah,
And in almost any context, there's always going to be complications.
right.
There isn't like a easy 1, 2, 3 step and everything goes as you always hope it would. So
Right.
when it came time then to go to assessment, what was that process like for you? You and Kara, you both went through it.
To go to assessment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of work to get ready to go to assessment. So the paperwork, uh, the amount of like, evaluations you do and, spiritual inventories and personality tests and, uh, references and all that. But I mean, I think everyone has different experience for assessment. And so I can't say my experience will be the same as everyone else's, but we were, um, we were like almost 10 years into ordained ministry at that point in time and about 15 years into ministry at that point or
Yeah.
so. Uh, so it was great. It was honestly like we just loved it.
Hmm.
Like I think getting people to like help talk to you about your giftings and your callings and helping them to like talk about things that you're more weak in, but not like a demeaning sort of way was really helpful for us. You got free counseling basically for a couple days. It was, I mean, again, I think everyone's going to go into it in a different season of life. And so I
Yeah.
think that's, and we just thought like, if they don't see that we're called to this, then that's very clarifying for us. And
Hmm.
then that's good for us.
Yeah.
So we really enjoyed it. So,
So then,
and
how?
Kara really, really enjoyed it. Like it was really good for
Okay.
Kara.
Yeah. That's
Probably even more than me. Just because I'm in this all the time. Like you and I would evaluate. Jamie, the senior pastor here at Cornerstone, now we were evaluating all the time. Like like my life is constantly evaluating with people.
yeah.
Things she doesn't have that experience, and so getting that
Right.
was really
It really is the only space in our tradition in which the wife, the ministry spouse, has the opportunity to get uh, helpful, positive feedback. People see you're gifted here because it's a 360 evaluation. It's not just the
yeah,
assessors; it's your references. It's
yeah,
all that work you do ahead of time for them to hear. We see God at work in your life, and here's some places you need to keep growing in.
yeah,
But it's all done in a very gracious, kind of caring context.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. It was really good. Yeah, I really
no.
enjoyed it.
So from assessment until in your first worship service was when? Was that October of 20?
Our first, we did. Well, we did 4 preview services.
Okay.
Um, so so again, I would preface that everyone's church planning experience
Yep.
is going to be
Oh yeah.
different.
Yeah.
We started in the summer of 2020, which was COVID raging.
Mm-hmm.
So my backyard was our church home.
Mm-hmm.
We did everything in my backyard. All our small groups met in my backyard for the most part. All of our like our uh, what do we call them? Like leadership meetings or vision casting
Yeah.
meetings or everything happened in my backyard. So um, then it gets cold in Wisconsin. It's
Yeah.
harder to do that come mid-September, late September, hopefully. So we ended up making the decision to to do preview services probably earlier than we normally would have
Mm-hmm.
because people people would tend to go to a church service, then go to someone's home
Yeah.
for kind of like gathering meeting. Like
Yeah.
that's not something people understand, anyways. Really.
And that
So
and that's somewhat is you're talking Wisconsin culture, even if people are a
yeah,
generation away from the Lutheran Catholic
yeah,
mindset. This general culture, they have a sense of
yeah.
Sunday morning is
They
something to
get
do.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we did end up doing those preview services on September, October, November, December. And they were good. I wouldn't say they were like booming. It still
Yeah.
was COVID, but the goal was to get some new people connected, and then to begin kind of creating a culture of worship in our church
Hmm.
body. So, um, and about November, we kind of made the decision. Um, Sunday nights are hard. Uh, we need to meet. We just need to bite the bullet and go Sunday morning and kind of like start gathering people this
Hmm.
way. Things are starting to loosen up a little bit. There was a restaurant, sports bar essentially that had upstairs
Hmm.
a conference center sort of banquet hall that would allow us to meet, which we couldn't find anywhere to let us meet.
Okay.
So we had a tough time. Um, so anyway, we started meeting regularly middle of January. So like January
Okay.
20th, something like that
All right.
was our first Sunday.
And so that's 2021.
Yeah.
And so up to that point, how did you find people? How did people find you?
Mhm. Uh, honestly, like it was word of mouth at the beginning because so much stuff was shut down. It was hard to
Yeah.
do a lot. So it was neighborhood stuff. It was Facebook stuff. It was, um, you know, we tried to do some things, but it was a little bit hard before we started worship regularly. I would say, trying to remember when they started to open some things back up. I would say it was like January where they started to open some things back up more. Um, and so there's a little bit more ability to get back with some
Hmm.
things. And so we started doing a lot of parties, but we'd already been meeting. So I would say like it's kind of reversed a little bit on how it would normally go. You'd probably do a
Yeah.
lot more parties to gather people together, and then there's this excitement for the launch. Ours is the launch, and then we're kind of like parties kind of coming
Yeah.
into this. So
Yeah.
it's just the nature of how it went.
Hmm.
But yeah, we did parties, and we'd promote them. We'd send out flyers. We'd send out stuff to the whole community, um, and then we would do like just try to get involved in stuff. So got involved in the Chamber of Commerce, which is not my favorite thing I've ever done in my entire life, but it's really great to meet people
Yeah.
and to like, talk about stuff. We tried to market any way we could, so we would support school stuff that was going on. They'd put our little logo on the back of shirts, and so
Okay.
all these 400 kids see our shirts and have our shirts, and they take them home. So
Yeah.
easy $200 to support these kind of things to get our logo out
Hmm.
there. Um, and then sports teams, community events. Um, we met one family that has been coming to our church for 2 years at a community-wide chili thing that I met
Okay.
him at a chili thing and started talking, and they've been coming to our church since then.
Yeah.
So just kind of being involved, like going to stuff, taking your family to it. We did a lot of church, kind of like us and a couple of families from church would go to these events and just meet
Hmm.
people.
And
And, yeah.
so you were talking about engaging the community, and you talked about sports events and some of the school events.
Mm.
How does that reflect who you are and where you're at in life, especially at that time, especially because
Well,
you,
I have a ton of children.
yeah,
No.
yeah, no, you
Well,
got
I mean, our kids are in
kids that
school.
age.
Yeah. Yeah, we have currently we have a 5-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 13-year-old. And so they're all in school. And
Yeah.
so 2 years ago, they would have been where they are. Uh, so yeah, I mean, I think any type of schooling you can do this, and you don't have to be a public school. You could be any kind of school or homeschool,
Yeah.
whatever. But just being involved and like going to the school meetings, going to the PTO meetings that you may
Hmm.
not love, but all of it is a chance to get around people. And so, we kind of just, I know people sometimes talk about using your kids as like evangelism pawns, but I don't see that as the case. It's more just I'm trying to teach them to like be present with people
Hmm.
and trying to use both fun experiences and experiences that we kind of don't want to go to at times
Yeah.
as opportunities just to meet people and to connect with them and
Mhm.
uh, start friendships that may result in conversations of faith, may result in them coming to our church. It may just result in like helping someone through a hard time. So
Right.
just trying to use opportunities the best we can.
Yeah, that's great. So all of this doesn't, you doesn't come cheap. It's not free. Fundraising is probably the thing that scares most people about church planting. Where's the money going to come from?
The Lord.
Yeah, well, tell me about what did that look like? Again, each context is different, but in your context, what did it look like?
Yeah. So our context, just by the nature of the way it worked out, ended up being about a third, a third, a third. It was kind of how it broke down for our church. Um, so I raised about a third of our budget. Having a team go with us ended up being about a third of my budget.
Okay.
And then Cornerstone committed to about a third of our budget as well. That in addition to like M&A, our presbytery support,
Yeah.
our honest support.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
those two pieces, the Cornerstone and M&A for Wisconsin, and then me raising support, and then our kind of tithing from our church
Yeah.
team.
So what was the context for you raising support? How did you go about doing that?
Yeah, so I just started calling people and sending out letters and sending out emails, and I mean, a lot of it just takes getting contacts and thinking through people, and
Hmm.
um, taking the time. I mean, there's a lot of strategies for raising support, and everybody's going to kind of find their rhythm to it. I've always thought it's helpful just to ask for like a specific kind of range from people, so it kind of helps them think about it.
Hmm.
And so it was I asked people to commit to 3 years, so we're kind of coming up on our 3 year, which is a little scary, but we're kind of but I just kind of ask people to consider a 3 year commitment and kind of a range of numbers.
Hmm.
And you know, you get some people that are going to give in a variety of ways, and
Yeah.
M&A provides a service that does all your accounting for you and does all the processing for free and does all the donor receipts and all that. So it's a great opportunity to like not have to worry about that for
Right.
a long time. And so, yeah, I would just say I just kind of blanketed all the people that I know, that not a lot of people in the Oconomowoc area, just because I didn't want them to get confused on what they were doing, even though I'd gotten to know some of them.
Hmm.
Um, but it was mostly like friends and family, and some people from Cornerstone. Cornerstone was gracious to let me talk to people at the church.
Okay. Yeah.
Other churches in the presbytery, other churches that I know, just a variety of
Yeah.
places. So,
About how much time did you feel like you were doing that? Kind of a percentage, can you?
hmm. It was mostly front end, honestly. Like I didn't do a
Hmm.
lot of like ongoing because most of it was commitments. I don't, I, and mostly now it's just thanking people, because things have kind of grown. So I don't need to probably press
Hmm.
that button a whole lot right now, thankfully. Um, uh, I mean, for a couple of weeks or maybe a couple of months, it was a lot. I mean,
Yeah. On the
you
front
know,
end, yeah, to get it going.
25% of my time
Okay.
for a while.
Hmm.
Um, for a while. I mean, and then I just I just worked really hard at it at the front end, and then I just kind of like just let it be, and then it was more following up from there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I took a couple of trips. Um, I didn't do a lot. It's mostly Lincoln, most to home to
Yeah.
Nebraska.
Going back to Nebraska. Yeah, good. Yeah, those folks in Nebraska have a lot of money. That's the place
Yeah.
to go.
So people have
So
money everywhere.
yeah, oh yes, yeah. It's often in places you don't always expect.
Yeah.
That's the reason just to do that broad work, and
Yeah.
it
And there's
comes.
also like I didn't use them as much, but there's like there's cohorts, and there's like networks and stuff people can.
Mhm.
I did not end up doing any of them because there's a lot of time, honestly. So I ended up raising money outside of it. But those are really helpful, and there's lots of great
Mhm.
opportunities for people
Mhm.
who either are struggling to raise money or like need some of those other kind of
Yeah.
connections in that way.
Yeah.
So
Well, let's talk about oversight. So you going out from a church. It's a mother daughter.
Mhm.
So there are a variety of ways oversight can be provided. What
Yeah.
was it like for your context? How's it
Yeah.
done there?
So we had a provisional session from the presbytery. Um, and so that
Would
involved, yeah, that involved a couple of ruling elders and a couple of teaching elders from, I think we had 4 churches kind of a part of that.
mm-hmm.
And basically the missions committee from the presbytery just kind of approves a group of people. And then the presbytery approves a group of people to oversee the church plant missions work. And I meet with them once a month and just kind of update on how things are going. And there's questions that are coming along, or shepherding related matters, or baptisms or memberships or things
Mm-hmm.
like that. Um, they just kind of oversee that and make sure that the things are
Yeah.
kind of being done as we should.
How is a provisional session helpful, and where is it not as helpful as you would like to see your session be when you particularize?
Yeah, I mean, I came into it. I've been on 2 or 3 as a member of a
Yeah,
provisional
yeah.
session.
You've been on the other
Kind of,
side of
I
it.
kind of knew what it was going to be like, so I'm glad I had that opportunity because I would have had a lot different expectations, I think. Um, so yeah, I mean, they're not a normal session. So to assume they're gonna like walk with you through all the shepherding matters and they're gonna get to know all of your people and they're gonna know all the details of them and all
Yeah.
that, like when they're also shepherding in a church, their own church.
Mhm.
So I think what worked well for me was understanding the limits, the capacity of these men, and sticking to a lot more business related matters and me. Uh,
Mhm.
so those are
Mm.
kind of the business related matters. So like memberships, attendance, um, baptisms, major things that were going on in the church,
Yeah.
changes that we're going to make, budget related stuff, all that kind of like those kind of things. Uh, and then like preaching schedule, like series, stuff like that. Shepherding, I'd have them pray for people, but I would not go into detail for like 20 minutes on different people.
Yeah.
And then I'd go pretty deep on me. So I'd tell them how we're doing as a family. And so that was a really good place for me to feel cared for personally. Um, you're giving out a lot through
Yeah.
the church. This is a great space to do that. Um, so, I mean, the way I hope a future session, which we're in particularization process now,
Yeah.
I, I hope our future session will partner with like the people more.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just
But
it's a
they're
different,
physically present. There's a
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of the difference there. I mean, these people have all been church. A lot of them have been a part of church plants too. So
Yeah.
I think it's just getting their wisdom and insight. And
And that's an aspect about where you plant, the presbytery in which you plant. If it's a presbytery that does planting, then it
Mhm.
gets a bit. There's an understanding. If you're
Yeah,
going to plant in a place they haven't done it, and your provisional session has no experience what a church plant is like, you got to figure out
it can be
the,
hard.
the other aspects. So you
Yeah.
said you're moving towards particularization. So it's been 2+ years of regular
Yep.
worship.
Yep.
So where are you on the path right now?
Yeah. We have had one leadership meeting. So so we're targeting July of 2024
Okay.
for our presbytery meeting to have the particularization approved.
Hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, we're beginning leadership training. It's been really great. So our first meeting we had 12 guys plus me there,
Okay.
which I didn't know who would show up. So I knew we'd have 3. So I'm really just trying to tell, part of it, when you plan in an area that's like has some history with like religion, it's not like it's like they don't understand like Lutheran Catholic, they get all these things,
Yeah.
but and there's like a kind of a resurgence of, or not a certain resurgence, but there's a lot of like presence of non-denominational kind of churches here.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think some of the things that separates us is our polity. And this actually has been like a really fun time. And I never would have thought that like leading people through the BCO would be a really fun thing. But like it's been really great. I
Yeah,
actually think
yeah.
it's one of the more attractive things of the PCA right now. And just in terms of some of our structure and polity and why we have the things we have in place. And so
Hmm.
just walking them through all that, it's been really great. We're doing a class like a we do some small groups that last kind of longer term, but most of our small groups are kind of classes because we don't have Sunday school,
Hmm.
so they're like
Hmm.
6 to 8 week classes that are small groups, and then
Yeah.
they stop, and then we start another one. So they kind of a
Yeah.
little bit different setup. And so we're actually doing one right now on who runs how Jesus runs the church,
Hmm.
kind of
Hmm.
walking people through that. It's just a 5 6 week class, and it's been great. Um,
Yeah.
really good conversation. So
Yeah.
we're kind of doing all that. Um, it'll be a long go and lots of prayer, and it's been good to challenge people and to see people. I mean, the whole point of it for me has been to get people to take buy-in, and that process is hard. There's been some things that have happened that in the last year that haven't been my first choice. But part of it has been as we get a leadership team that's not ordained leadership team, but like just a general helpful leadership team.
Hmm.
Some of that means I have to die to my personal opinions,
Yeah.
and like I would love, like for example, like I love like being a little bit heavier liturgically, but we're
Hmm.
actually lessening our litter because of the. I think there's kind of the way that we're getting people to come in,
Hmm.
and I'm okay with that. And I'd rather have people come to worship at the church than me kind of push an agenda that I
Right.
have.
Right.
And obviously, church planners are going to have different opinions on
Hmm.
all that, but um, buy-in is really important, and that's what I think this process helps do.
Yeah. What is one thing, looking back now over the whole process,
Yeah.
all 10 years, what is one thing you do differently?
Um, I could, well, I could probably do several, but I think learning patience and trusting in God's timing.
Mm.
I think that I can look back on it now and I see it with a different set of eyes than I did in the moment. Um, I think you it can become a like a I don't know. You really get set on something, and it can be hard when that just adjusted. Um, but just taking it slow
Hmm.
and trust that if it don't plant, then the Lord's going to use it in a different way. And I think that to me has would have been something I would have liked to have
Yeah.
done a little differently.
Okay. Some patience. So, what is there? Sure, there are many, but one high and one low that you've found in church planting.
Um, yeah. Uh, I mean, it's hard because like the highs are like people's stories. Those are always the
Yeah.
high.
Okay.
Um, so just kind of we just did a membership interview last night. Um, and we seem to like have been getting a lot of these people that have been really hurt by the church and have either left the church
Hmm.
or were in process of leaving church together altogether.
Hmm.
Um, and so we tend to get some of those people, which is if that's who the Lord provides, and we can give some place of healing, that's
Hmm.
great. Yeah, I mean, so I think just those stories just I don't ever get tired of hearing
Yeah.
how the Lord's starting to like reinvigorate their hearts to Him again.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, that's great. Um,
In a,
my kids
yeah.
became members, which was pretty cool.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Lord Supper, so that's awesome. Um, yeah, I mean, we had a really fun. We just have some really fun parties. So I don't know. There's a lot of
Yeah.
highs, but
Yeah.
those
And the
stories are really good.
and
The low,
the low. If
yeah,
if
I
you're
would
trying
say
to
the low.
prepare somebody for
Yeah,
planting.
yeah. I think it's being prepared that I mean, especially the first, you know, first season, whatever that time frame is. The church looks a lot like you. So, um, as much as you want it to not look like you, and as much as you have a team, like
Yeah.
you're the main one up there all the time. Your personality is all over the place. So when people don't like it, they don't. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's very personal. So I think I think being prepared for people not to want to stay
Yeah.
is hard. So we had one person leave after a couple of weeks that said some I thought they were pretty harsh things. And then someone just left for less harsh things, but was kind of a very kind of core gathered person that we had that was actually moved to not our core team, but and that was a hard one. And so, I think just being prepared to weather some storms of people leaving, and it's hard.
Yeah. So what would Ben today say to Ben 8, 9 years ago?
um, yeah. Uh, learn to pray, like work on your prayer life.
Yeah.
Pray more. Continue to like. I think that's been an area that God's grown me a lot in since planting. But I'm not sure I prayed like I should or still do. But
Yeah. I haven't met anybody that said, I think I'm praying enough. I need to
yeah,
cut back.
sure,
So,
sure.
but
But
yeah,
no, I
no,
really
but
think I
yeah, the
need like
centrality of
like
prayer. Yeah.
work at praying, like grow that discipline in your life, and
Yeah.
um, it'll reap fruits for sure.
Oh, excellent. Well, good. Well, good. Well, anything in conclusion you want to leave with those who are considering planting? You just,
Yeah, explore.
yeah.
Dream, like look into it and ask questions, and yeah, get around church planners. I think if you want to, if you're interested in church planning, go visit church plants.
Yeah.
Like go spend some time at them, intern with them. I think those are all opportunities that people have, and I thought I would take advantage of those.
Oh, that's great.
Thanks for
Well,
having me.
yeah, well, Ben, thank you so much. Certainly appreciate it. And I'm sure the students will appreciate it, and they'll write up, I think, for this one, some long thoughts, and I won't send them to you because if they're, it will
I'll leave it
it will swell your head is what I mean. So,
good.
all right. Well, thank you much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.